Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand. I'm here with Carl Forehand, and we have a guest tonight that we've kind of been waiting a while to speak to.
Hmm.
So we have Tia Levings here. She is a New York Times bestselling author of A Well-Trained Wife. That's the name of her memoir, and it is a memoir of her escape from Christian patriarchy. In the book, she spotlights the realities of Christian fundamentalism, evangelical patriarchy, and religious trauma. Her work appears in Teen Vogue, Salon, and the Huffington Post and Newsweek. Her story was featured in the hit Amazon docuseries Shiny Happy People. Based in North Carolina, she is a mom of four incredible adults and likes to travel, hike, paint, and daydream. Her second book, which I cannot wait for its release, is called I Belong to Me, which will be released in 2026.
Hmm.
She is a survivor of tradwife, quiverfull, and patriarchal abuse. Please welcome to the program Tia Levings. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to finally meet you and talk to you. This book was incredibly powerful to read. It was almost like, I mean, having been through religious trauma myself, there were things that I was like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Like, but then there were definitely things that were very shocking in your story. So
Hmm.
I look forward to talking to you about, yeah, about your story.
Yeah. 2 years ago, we had an online conference and we had only female speakers, so only women speakers, and one trans person is pretty diverse, but
Hmm.
it was all women, and all of them, without counseling together, had the same advice for men. They said,
Mhm.
read women's stories. And it was almost like they had kind of confab together and contrived against me to give me that message. And so we started pretty quick after that, listening to stories on our podcast. Uh,
Mhm.
but then a month or two ago, when I got your book and read it and read another survivor story right after that, I was literally curled up on the recliner reading
Hmm.
and in some places just weeping.
Hmm.
Um, so
Very hard. So in some spots, but very necessary. You know what I mean? Like there isn't anything in your book, A Well-Trained Wife, that isn't absolutely pertinent to your story.
discussion, yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
to the
Yeah.
discussion as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
So we want you to get a chance to tell your story to our audience, and
Mm.
then hopefully they get the book and dig a little bit deeper
Hmm.
and get all the
Yeah.
juice out of that. So uh, we think stories are sacred, and we promise to treat them with respect and listen. So have at it, Tia.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm so glad that that was their advice because I think stories are so powerful. They're firsthand accounts, but they're more importantly the fruit of the ideologies that are elevated as some sort of ideal that we need to be aspiring to. And those ideals are always really attractive and tempting for people. And I like to caveat every story with the reminder that people are drawn to these things because they think they're going to solve their pain and solve their life and make things better. And so when we remember that, it's something we can all relate to of the innocence that we get involved into situations that we can see in hindsight were problematic, but we don't know that going into it. And most importantly, when someone's born into it, they, don't even get a chance to have that option. So, my story starts out very ordinary. I always start at the beginning, which was about 10 years old for me. It's not, like sometimes we have this joke in memoir writing land, like you don't want to start, I was a child and this was the beginning of my story.
Right.
But, it really, when I was writing my book, which was about a 10-year process, for the good portion of that time, probably 8 years, I started with my marriage. And that's not where the story starts. The story starts with why I would accept that marriage, because it was problematic from the beginning of meeting him before we were even engaged. And I knew that a reader was not going to understand the context of that decision unless I started at the beginning, which
Hmm.
for the beginning was are joining a Southern Baptist megachurch. Very mainstream experience, especially in the 80s and 90s. My parents weren't high control, fringe people. They were Midwestern, hardworking people who took their daughters to church because they wanted us to have good, safe, clean entertainment and a friends group and be monitored. They were both really hardworking. So the more we could be at church, the more they could be free to do the things they needed to do. And, I was used to seeing my mom work alongside my dad. My mom was a business owner too. So definitely, if there was any patriarchy in my family, it was embedded and it wasn't obvious. We didn't lead that way. But very quickly, I was going to church 6 days out of 7 or some church related activity. And my whole world was this church. And that might not have been a problem, except that church was becoming more fundamentalist and nationalist as we grew up. So those were my formative teenage years. And they did form me. They did groom me. They did mold me into, they used to say, the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But that looked a lot like strict gender roles. Purity culture, high emphasis placed on being a good Christian wife and skipping college, and you don't need a career. It was very uniform. We churned out teenagers, and parents found comfort in that. Parents wanted these good outcomes for their kids. Being molded this way is safe for parents because you're not going to have to deal with a pregnant teenager or a drug problem or an atheist or, one of those other things that parents are just so afraid of.
Right.
So, I looked at my life for years as though this was just a great upbringing. I had great friends, great memories, and I did not necessarily register it as trauma. It's also important to note that in the 80s and 90s, we didn't really have that word. We didn't have any of this language that helps us diagnose and identify today. So I just did what I was supposed to do, which was listen to the men. You don't ever tell a man no. I knew that very well by 18. And when a young man showed up and said he was God's will for my life, I didn't necessarily like him or know him very well, but I couldn't argue with that. So retrofitted my dreams onto him and accepted that proposal and then found myself in quite the situation. My young husband was mentally disorganized. He turned to religion to help him cope with that. So I'm always paying close attention when I hear someone talk about religious scrupulosity or like an OCD level of devotion. I think we see that in the manosphere today with these young men that are just, they hunger for debate, theological debate, which again can look like a good thing. It can look like young men who hunger for the heart of God and want to know, they want to live righteous lives. And without stories to tell us how that works out and what's actually happening, we don't know other than this presentation that this desire is good and healthy. He was not able to handle the responsibilities placed on him. And however familiar your listeners are with Christian patriarchy, puts a lot of responsibility on the men. The fact that you can't be in an egalitarian partnership, you have to be in this top-down power structure. Your wife is supposed to submit to you. That is a lot of additional responsibility to an already struggling young man, and he didn't handle that well. So we had domestic abuse right away. And the confounding thing, the thing that really made me struggle for the next 13 years to understand is that every time we turned to our church or a church leader or a pastor or a book, they all just drove us to greater conservatism and what I came to call church-sanctioned domestic abuse, because he was hurting me, but we were using a model that said that was okay because he was actually helping me be more sanctified. He was actually helping me submit. He was controlling his household and running his household. And the fruit of that was abuse and neglect and all kinds of isolation. The book details all of this. At the same time, our theology was narrowing. We were becoming Calvinist, and we were becoming more and more strict, more and more reformed. We see that happening in our culture today. The evangelical model has become more theonomist is a word that we use a lot because it applies the Old Testament and the works of Paul onto modern society and kind of skips Jesus and all the grace and love and partnership and all the Samaritan grace that we were supposed to be modeling. We just skip over that part because it's too liberal, and we emphasize Ephesians 5 and submission, first part of it there. My story encapsulates a 13-year marriage. I had 9 pregnancies, 5 live births, 4 surviving children. I was excommunicated by our final church for not putting my writing in my husband's name. I wasn't supposed to be writing, but there was a cat out of the bag that they couldn't contain. And so, like, at the very least, I could pretend that, my husband wrote it. I wouldn't comply.
Mhm.
And then my husband had a psychotic break, which required a midnight escape. So that's why it's my escape from Christian patriarchy. It was very narrow, very harrowing. And then that became a 10-year road to recovery and personhood, selfhood, and the person that you see today. Like, that took a lot of work.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a high level overview of a well-trained wife and a little bit of a segue into I Belong to Me.
Yeah. Um, your story it's so well written, that I just kind of followed along with you, and it wove together things that we saw as a pastor and his wife, um, into these other experiences. Somehow they're kind of weaving together, and I just said, "Ugh," a lot. I was ugging a lot, whatever that is.
Yeah.
The sigh and a girl. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
it's heavy in places.
You just really feel that. So we thank you for sharing it with us. Um, it anyway, so get the written word, get you an audiobook or whatever and read that. But you said in the book at one point, dying to myself didn't have the generous and holy impact that Paul hoped it would. The women in Proverbs, she was someone until she became a nameless example. And like a slip of the hand beneath the ocean's waves, nobody saw me vanish as they focused on what I did instead of who I was. Tell us about that. What brings that thought?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Sometimes I still get a little bit emotional about that,
Oh,
because it did
absolutely.
feel like a slow vanishing, and you're lauded at the same time for vanishing, and that was so antithetical to survival. Um, I felt like, you get this very consistent message that to live is Christ and to die is gain, and you should die to yourself, and service is Jesus, others you, and it's never your turn because there's always someone you can put in front of that. And
Mhm.
the Quiverfull mods mindset and the tradwife mindset is high service, high labor is so intense. We're making things way harder than they need to be. We're not taking advantage of so many modern conveniences and the advances of civilization. So we are intentionally living a harder life. And that's hardest, I think, on the women. The men have their own cross to bear and their own weight, but they're like usually out in the workplace doing modern things, and the
Mhm.
women are usually at home, scrubbing things by hand and doing things the slow way on purpose because it's supposed to sanctify us. And I was a very young woman in this story. Like, those are my early 20s.
Mhm.
Having repeated babies, I'm exhausted all of the time. I'm not cared for, and I'm always molding myself into this service model. Like, the Proverbs 31 woman is actually a collection of women. It's not one, but they
Right.
present her as one,
Mhm.
and she doesn't even get a name. That killing of myself, of my spirit, of my verve, of everything that makes me unique, didn't have the effect. It didn't make me feel more holy. It didn't give me more energy to serve. I didn't have a full love tank. That's
Mhm.
the evangelical language, Gary
Right.
Chapman stuff. My love tank was always empty, is always on fumes because nothing that fed me was allowed. And that was really hard to reconcile with a savior, a God that's supposed to know me by name. Like,
Mhm.
why would he bother? I'm nobody. I'm like, literally, there's nothing special about me, and everything is interchangeable and replaceable.
Mhm.
Um, so I just felt like I was vanishing. And the more that I disappeared, the greater the approval from other people. So then that's a very twisted message in your head, because the less you are like yourself, the more accepted you are, which,
Would you call that some people describe that as getting small?
yeah, yeah.
You just have to get real little. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's true. I mean, and I also had an eating disorder at the same time. So, uh, smaller is better, and there's a trend. We see this en masse when conservative patriarchy is in power. the women, the diet culture, the getting smaller emphasis has returned, and we are decades back again, to I don't know what your language policy is on your show, but
And say
Say
whatever.
whatever you
say
want.
whatever, the skinny white bitch is
Yeah, yeah.
back, like that's the aesthetic, of course it's timed with medications that help us achieve that faster than ever. So that is the trend, and yeah, you're literally getting smaller. You're literally disappearing and fading into this uniformity that it's just soul crushing.
Mm.
Something that I experienced as a pastor's wife was the rules were always changing. Okay.
Yeah.
So and I don't know if you experienced that too, or if you can talk about your experience with that, but it just seemed like whenever I would try to take that step as a pastor's wife to take the initiative in something, they would change the rules so that I had to become smaller or quieter or just not, not really be there at all.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
you're like an accessory to your husband.
yes,
Like
yes,
you're not really supposed to speak or express yourself. That
yes.
especially if it would disunify you. That
Mhm.
no, no, no. Like that could really shake a whole church up right there.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's so, I mean, it's such a it just messes with your mind. It
yeah.
just really messes with you. I don't know how else to put that except that it just really messes with you because you do absolutely not only are you becoming smaller physically, like what you're talking about, the things you have to do to be, skinnier or
Mhm.
whatever, but be quieter. But I mean, you're basically becoming invisible, and it's
Right.
just yeah, yeah,
Yeah. The invisible women and the moving goalposts. They're just,
yeah.
it's never enough.
Hmm.
I talk about
Or
it
it's
like,
always too much.
or it's too much, right?
Right.
Any self-expression is too much.
Yeah.
Any opinion. There's this irony that was always running in the background. So we got involved in Bill Gothard's Institute of Basic Life Principles, which
Mhm.
really rose through churches in the late 90s and
Yeah.
early 2000s and cannibalized congregations. But he has this gifts of the spirit thing, personality test like thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
always came up as a prophet, which is not typical for women. And it's a problem when a woman is a prophet because it's going to be a thorn in her side. She's going to have to constantly dim her light and shut her trap because you cannot be a prophet in a submissive model like that. You can't be
Yeah.
telling other people what to do or expressing your insights. They don't want that. It makes you stand out. And so I was always trying to craft myself into this demure person that I just never have been. I haven't been demure a day in my life. That's not that's something I came here to be.
Right.
And ignore the fearfully and wonderfully made parts, right? Like no, I wasn't allowed to celebrate my own creation or my strengths. I had to constantly form them. And then I would do that and I would do it so well because I was a good girl and I was really obedient and I was really trying hard. And then they would move the goalpost and now there's another level. And
Mhm.
I was starving and I was suffocating and I didn't know how to be the mother that I needed to be to my children because everything that made me strong was bad and I wasn't good at the things that they said I needed to be. And then when I would master it, it wasn't enough. So then I was like, oh, okay, now what more do you want from me? I
Right.
don't have anything left to give. It's like the entire religion was a vampire, and I was, bloodless by that point.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, and that fearfully and wonderfully made. I mean, I think of, isn't that something that, we believe that God believes about us, and yet typically the men, I will say that I've had a lot of trauma from women in the church as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that they are the ones who determine what is fearfully and wonderfully made for you. And if it seems like if it at all rubs them the wrong way, then yeah, we got to squash that. So you
Right.
really don't know who you are, and you don't know, that's how I felt when we first came out of organized religion. Was it's like I have no idea what I like, what I
Mhm.
I mean, I didn't know who I was, what I really truly believed. I mean, any of that. So, Yeah, it is I'm going to use a bad word. It's such a mind fuck. It just is. Like
It totally is. I was trying not to say that
you
specific phrase.
can,
I was
no,
like, that's what it is. I
it
don't know
is. It
how
is.
else
It's
to
just,
describe it.
yeah. And even when I think about it now, I don't know about you, and maybe you've healed so much more than I have, but I still feel it. I still feel it in my body. Like even hearing your story and the things that happen, I'm like, oh my gosh, that just feels so real to me right now. So
Well, that's where I had to really do so much of my work. And that's why I Belong to Me is written the way that it is. It's a survivor's guide because it wasn't the trauma that was the hardest part for me to deal with coming out. It was the fact that I had no sense of self.
yes.
I looked like an adult 33-year-old mother of four, but I didn't feel like one, and I didn't know how to operate in an adult world, and I didn't know who Tia was. And putting myself back together revealed that I had never developed. I had been indoctrinated. So
Mhm.
I knew how to recite and perform and be the patriarchy's poster kid, but I did not know how to be who I need to be. And at the same time, I was fighting for custody and trying to heal my life and reclaim my future, whatever was left of it.
Mhm.
And you can't do that as a fragmented person. So a lot of my therapy had to confront that, but then I also had to like build a person, build who I was
Yes.
and
Yeah.
return back to who I was supposed to be before they got their hands on me. Because if you'll remember, I was 10 when we joined. So
Right.
I had been somebody before. And so that inner child work and
Hmm.
self-reclamation, a lot of it centered on going back to who Tia was.
Right. So I'm just going to ask a quick follow-up question. I don't mean to take over the conversation or anything, but so I love that you talk about how, it started when you were 10 or like, because I had to do that too. I had to think about because I was in my 20s when he became a pastor. And so,
Okay.
or maybe my 30s, maybe I was in my early 30s. So
32.
it's not like the indoctrination was there all along, and yet it was because I do feel like there was something about um maybe how I was raised that kind of played like something was already there
Set you
Yeah.
up for
that
that.
set me up to yeah, to take the
Mhm.
crap that I took. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Well,
So,
yes, that's why I started with saying this is why stories are so important.
mm,
We get into things because they feel good. So fundamentalism always promises order where
yeah.
there's chaos. And we
Mm,
have generational trauma that isn't always religious. We have attachment wounds as people. We have a culture that's been, influenced by religion for so many years. And we have like real traumatic wounds that have followed us along as each generation has tried to
right.
sort out, are we going to repeat the mistakes of the past or are we going to actually move forward? And so I think when I hear people's stories of when they get involved later in adulthood like that, they have wounds that have never been healed or addressed. And here comes religion promising to solve it. Here's Jesus
Exactly.
who's going to fill every hole you have
Yes.
and really be the balm that you need and have every solution to every problem. And we know from stories that that's not true, but they're blocking those stories. They excommunicate those people. They shame us into silence. And that's, I think, one of the wonderful things that's happening now is that we actually have access to these stories now. Like we have more testimony and research and data and memoirs and all of the things that help somebody make a more informed decision. And
Mhm.
fortunately, it's at the same time that patriarchy's got the biggest sales pitch they've had in decades.
Right.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah.
So we've kind of moved on out to what we call the desert, or lately
Yeah.
I've been calling it the Wild West of deconstruction,
Yeah.
with some of the things and the controversies going on, and the progressive groups that aren't acting right and things like that. And you got all kinds of individuals that I don't, see the widespread, corruption kind of bad organizations because they haven't formed yet, right? But we're
Right.
still having some issues out here in the desert. So what can you just talk about, what your journey's been like since you became free of the
Mhm.
marriage, and Cary Grant or no Cary Grant, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
But just kind of what you've been through, and what's helpful, what's not, and can you just talk
Yeah.
about your journey a little bit out in the desert?
Sure. So when I left in 2007, and I was so vulnerable, I did what a lot of people find themselves doing, which I fell for high control after coming out of high control. So I didn't like remarry a physical abuser, but I did marry somebody who was love bomby,
Mm.
very controlling, very patriarchal. He was benevolent, but he was still very much a rigid patriarchal person who had a vision for what he wanted, and his wife was to be very quiet and demure. And I seemed that way in the beginning because I was broken. I
Yeah.
was broken and weak, and I was struggling to get back on my feet. And I was very grateful to feel loved. And for listeners who are confused about Cary Grant, that's how I refer to him in the book. Um, because he swept me off my feet, and I did feel chemistry with him. And in many ways, that relationship healed parts of me that had been broken in the first marriage.
Mm.
But I was becoming a person, as I said before. I was developing as a human during that marriage, and it ended with the sale of my book, basically. So we had also a 13-year run, and um, he didn't want to be married to a writer, and he didn't want to be married to someone who knew her mind and had her voice and was going to do this work. And it was amicable, but it was, and it's a big spoiler for the book, but I always talk about it. It's like I'm clearly not in that marriage anymore. And I wasn't expecting when I sold the book. I had kind of written it like a happy ever after, and I needed to end. I had to add a whole new ending, which was so appropriate because A Well-Trained Wife is the story of my coming of age. It's how I lost my voice and then found it again.
Mm.
And I am the love story. The love story back to myself is the love story, not a man. So going through that process of becoming myself, realizing how that was going to impact relationships, making the steps in my faith and in my what my church attendance might look like, especially during as the Trump rose to power. I was in the middle of journaling this story just as my therapeutic process. I was not going to ever publish. These were my deepest, most embarrassing situations, most heinous traumas, and I'd never imagined putting them out on a wider stage. And it's because I didn't have the timeliness of it. I didn't have the purpose. I didn't see a reason. And I also just wasn't psychologically ready for that. And I think that's really important when there are listeners who are like, I have this big story and I want to write it and tell it. You really have to make sure your story is cooked to a point that you can talk about it day in and day out and not re-traumatize yourself. In
Right.
2016, I could not have done that. I was still flushing and stammering and being re-traumatized every time I thought about these stories. Putting them on the page felt brave, let alone putting them on, national media. It's
Right.
just
Yeah.
in some big interviews, and like younger me would have been too stunned to believe that. So that is a process. That whole healing process was such a graduation, process of steps. And um, learning to identify my parts and the way trauma had been stored in my body, and then names for it. Like we didn't have the deconstruction movement necessarily in 2007. It was just getting off the ground. And then identifying, to your point, Carl, the vulnerabilities that persist. So all of us are coming out of some level of trauma and abuse, which means we're messy. We haven't done our work. When our job depended on that, like in the case of pastors, we ended up with a lot of grifters that still need to make a buck and they don't know what they're going to do without their church. So
Mhm.
let me make $1 on recovery. That has ethical
Yeah.
problems. We've had therapists didn't exist. Now we have religious trauma therapists. It's kind of a brand new pioneering field, not without its problems. And so that tendency within us all to want to find belonging in a group is still there, and it's still an open, gaping wound. And that's also why my second book is called I Belong to Me, because I had to get to a place where I wasn't searching for belonging in a group anymore. I had a sense of belonging within myself, and I don't need a group that I agree with or believe with in order to find safety. I am safe within myself. That feels like a completed character arc as far as those storylines go. And I'm ready for the next chapter and the next, whatever is ahead for me in life. But it wasn't until I got to that point that I was ready to do this work. And I strongly suggest anybody that's on a trauma healing path to get to the place where they feel like their character arc has looped to a place where they have resolved and integrated their experiences, where you can talk about them and not be destroyed by it and not
Mhm.
consumed.
Right.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of work, and that
Yes, it
takes
does.
time. It takes time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I keep telling myself is that it's going to take as long as it's going to take, but finding myself again
Yeah.
is what's most important. Yeah.
What's most important, and it's life, a
Yeah.
healing is life. To as long as you're moving, you're fluid, you're
Right.
growing, you're living,
Mm-hmm.
which I find a lot of freedom in.
Right.
Mhm.
Mm.
So good. We, I was going to read a few more of your quotes. I
Yeah.
don't know where I'm going to get to.
Mhm.
But let me see. Um, so detangling a web is nothing easy, but I was grateful that night for a midwife of a different kind, a friend who didn't offer platitudes. Maybe this kind of goes with what we've been saying. Friend that didn't offer platitudes, just a witness. I didn't have I didn't have to tell every secret that night, just one,
Yeah,
right?
that was the night of my escape,
Mm.
which was so unplanned. I had gotten to a place in the marriage where I knew I was going to leave. Things were very dangerous, and I had started to kind of put a plan together to get out safely, and it didn't go that way,
Mm.
and circumstances changed, and so I found myself. Which it did. It did. I just used the passive voice. I found myself. I don't remember going there or directing this. It was very much reactive mode.
Mm.
In someone's home who needed to know what happened, and all I had to say was what happened right then.
Mm.
Um, and this friend, she had been a fellow home birther. We talked about midwifery a lot, and she kind of entered into that spirit of like bearing witness, just being there with you. And it was really comforting to me because it's kind of the first time that I had been around anyone just bearing witness. Like
Mm.
they didn't need to sermonize, they didn't need to give me advice. I didn't need more, wasn't required of me than I could handle. All I had to do was the bare minimum. And she was with me in that moment. And she made me some tea and we talked and I got some sleep a little bit, not much. My children were safe. Like it was sort of a birth into a new life, and I'm really grateful for her presence.
We
Mm.
we sometimes say, I used to look for mentors. You know,
Hmm.
I didn't have a strong father, so I was looking for mentors, and I wanted the silver bullet. And pastors would tell me, I don't have any silver bullets for you. Just keep doing what you're doing, or whatever. But it's different than that after deconstruction, I think, when you kind of go on your own journey instead of someone else's. That we always say that effective guides will come along when you need them.
Hmm.
And it does sort of happen like that. But people also talk, and mine was when I spent time with some Benedictine sisters, and they called themselves empathetic witnesses. You know,
Hmm.
and you have other people talk about the enlightened witness.
Hmm.
Well, either that's to deliver you a simple message that's not guilt ridden, like you said, exactly like you said, that it's just it's a positive message. When I in shame would say, I'm not significant, your grandma would say, you're significant,
Mm.
and make you believe that.
Yeah.
So but mostly they listen and they kind of groan with you and things like that. I'm so glad to know your story and to be able to kind of live through it and have it touch my story and Laura's story.
Hmm.
And um, so it just brought us closer. So that's good.
Hmm.
But now you've moved in your next wave. Is that a good way to
I
describe it?
don't know. Yeah.
Seems like you're writing every day.
I do write every day.
Yeah.
That's true. I
So
say that I sounded tired, but that's just because we're recording this at the end of the day.
sure.
Yeah.
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 So maybe just spend some time talking about how you're moving into the new book and
Hmm.
what you're thinking right now and where we can find you and all those kind of things.
Yeah. So this did become my day job, and that is again nothing I would have anticipated. I wrote A Well-Trained Wife, and they tell you when you publish, a book, you got to have an author platform, and you need to help readers understand why this, why me, why now. And politics made that point for me. The world I ran away from came from my country, and I couldn't stay silent about it. So my book continues to be more and more timely, which is a mixed bag of blessings, let me tell you. Um, I would much rather spend time talking about it in retrospect instead of as prophetical.
Right.
Um, but that's not the world we live in. And so in conveying that to potential readers, a platform became a job. So I make the social media content educating on the evangelical influences in our culture and in our politics, because people can feel they know it's religious, but they don't understand why. There are so many people who have very different experiences of Christianity, or none at all. Like every once in a while, I'll meet somebody with no religious baggage whatsoever. And I think, what a unicorn you are. You give me so
Right.
much hope. I love you so much. But for the most part, people are feeling wrecked by Christian nationalism, and they don't know what to call it or why it's here or how anybody could behave this way or believe this way. And they've only heard rosy pictures about Jesus at the holidays, and they don't understand what this political agenda is. And so I am working on that every day on social media, Substack, and in my future books. I sold I Belong to Me before Wife came out. So the whole publishing is 2-year process. So the whole time we were getting Wife ready, I was working on Belong. And of course, Belong comes out. I just sold the third book last week, so I'll be getting going on that. It's another nonfiction book about toxic relationships and leaving, and how to leave toxic situations. And that's all I can say about it, because it's a brand new baby book.
Yeah.
And then I'm working on fiction as well, because I do envision a world beyond Donald Trump's politics and this
Yeah.
this patriarchal hellhole we find ourselves in, where stories, continue to grow. I also have kind of a penchant for dark comedy and things that help us laugh our trauma out, like so we're not crying all the time. And my sensitivity meter for what is truly horrific is different than the mainstream, in that I am not afraid of contrived horror because I've had too much actual horror.
Yeah.
I think my books will have a unique spin on them. So, I sold Wife at the same time my youngest left the house and turned 18 and became an adult. So it was a very interesting pivotal moment for me, in that my motherhood career was done as far as active parenting goes, and this new incarnation of being an author, being on my own, and then now in a new relationship, which in the sweetest way is with a man who I've known since I was 16, and we have a common background, and it's wonderful because it feels like we've known each
Oh,
other forever, because we have.
yeah.
And I've got grandbabies, and I live in a new state, and so this is very much a pivot into a new future.
Can I ask you, I'm kind of, I do this. I kind of hop back to the beginning of
Sure.
our podcast together. So, and you had talked about, how your parents had taken you to this church when you were 10, and that's kind of where your story started, so to speak. So, I just remember being a parent of young ones at one point too, before Carl even got into the ministry. And what I gathered from you is that just that we as parents do that because there's a sense of fear. Like if we can take our kids to church, then they're not going to get pregnant, like you said, or they're going to have the right kids to run around, or we know where they are, we know that their entertainment is pure and good and all that kind of stuff. But if you could say anything to parents, because I feel like I know a lot of young parents, and that seems to be, and I'm not saying like don't take your kids to church, but if you had any kind of advice on, or is there something they should be looking for, or like how can we, if I could go back and do it over again, how could I just like, what would I know what to look for? I don't know if I'm making any sense here,
Yeah,
but
no, you are. You
um,
are.
I just feel like we went to church because I'll speak for myself, because I was fearful. I
Mhm.
was afraid. I was afraid, well, if we don't do the purity rings, if we don't do this, our girls are gonna get pregnant. Never hardly ever thought about our son, and what kind of trouble
Right.
he could get in, because it was the girls. So
Right.
But if you had any advice, I guess, for parents, like what would you say now that you've kind of had this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked a lot lately, like, how do I know the warning signs that we're falling into a
Yeah.
high control system, especially with the red pills being so subtle? Like you just um, you you latch onto a topic online and it like this happens in the trad wife life a lot. Like someone will like chickens and they'll be watching videos about chickens, and then pretty soon we're watching Christian patriarchy videos about chicken keeping as part of homesteading as part of a national agenda, and they're like, wait, well, how did that happen? I didn't realize I was joining a pipeline. So like how parents can watch for that. I always come back to, and I did this with my children too. There's no easy formula out of the pain of the human experience. So if you already realize that you don't want to be in environments that stoke your fears, that other people by using us them language that make you feel more afraid of the world out there, everything is figure outable. All of these problems, like why do teenagers get pregnant? Because they have sex. How do you prevent having, pregnancy? There's contraception for that. Like, or listening to like survivors of purity culture. Like, how does that work out? Like, it can be wonderful to stay. People say that it can be wonderful to stay a virgin until you get married. My argument was always I would spend more time test driving a car than a sexual partner for life. So that's not a good thing.
Right.
Like I think that's probably antiquated. Um, my biggest thing that I do now is when I'm presented with an ideal, I say, okay, are there survivors from this?
Mm,
Who are they? What do they say about this? And it's like kind of like a consumer review.
mm,
Um, that's good critical thinking. That's doing
yeah.
your homework to see, okay, is this really something I want for my life? They make it look very attractive. Does it really bear out that way?
Mm,
And then you can, make adjustments from that. When I was raising my kids, we talked constantly and just really explored these ideas. And, my goal was to raise children that weren't fundamentalists.
mm,
It was okay with me if they chose a religious path or, they still were raised around evangelicals that held the same values because my family is still evangelical they hold all the same values.
mm.
And so that's their grandparents. And so
Right.
I, had to help them navigate like what's it like when your friends are in relationship with somebody who believes differently than you. You're not going to try to convert them.
Mm,
We're not going to do that because we know how that ends. So it's like a lot of if then and looking for the counter, the fruit of the situation or the fruit of the movement. And then also allowing yourself to progress and advance and understanding that we do live in better times. We know what it's like to be Puritans. We know what it's like to live before civil rights. When people portray that as a better way to live,
mm,
it's really important we look at the whole picture and say, okay, was it really and was it for everybody?
mm.
Because if it only benefits one kind of person,
Yeah.
then it's probably not where we need to go now. You
Mhm.
know, there's a reason we left it in the first
Yeah,
place.
that's what I was gonna say. There's a reason we moved away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We don't want that anymore.
exactly.
We may have gone too far with Uber. Not only
Right.
fast food, but bring my fast food to me and
Hmm.
don't make me talk to you or anything like
Right. Put it at my doorstep, please.
that.
Yeah, right. That is one thing like that still baffles me though, is that despite the fact that our children were raised in Southern Baptist evangelical churches, um, they never bought it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful. Like I'm just so grateful. And like I don't know, it's just it's so like it's odd and it's wonderful all at the same time. I am grateful though. They kept that critical thinking part despite my neurotic mothering and all that other kind of stuff. So I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Broad worldviews are so valuable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now they know what they're choosing away from too. So
Exactly.
that's empowering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want one more quote, okay?
Yes.
So on page 238, you said, but there was also the word, you're talking about words. There was the word I put away like a box stuffed into the back of the closet. I held the word, um,
You've got something. There you go.
I'm sorry. There's a box of photographs stuffed in the back of the closet. I had held the word now. Watching it materialize as my finger traced this into the sawdust on the floor. And you said, I wanted more. Is that more was the word you wrote?
Yeah. Yeah. I um I had to come to peace with my own personal ambition and my hunger for life and my big wide arms that want a big abundant life. I want to live the longest life I possibly can. We get one lifetime,
Mhm.
and I wanted to make the most of it. And one thing patriarchy always took from me was abundance and more. It just narrowed me and made me small, and I didn't want my future to be that way. And I don't dream small. I don't really see the point in dreaming small. If you're dreaming,
Mhm.
go big or, go home.
Mhm.
Um, and so my dreams are big, but they have a way of coming true. Like I defy odds and I break statistics, and I think that's wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they say in the South, kind of flippantly, don't fake yourself out, but also don't sell yourself short,
Mhm.
right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
I'm good for the money. When I bet on myself, I'm good for the money, and
Yeah.
I know that about myself without shame now.
Yeah. And you wanted more, and it's okay to want that. It's
It
okay
is.
to have that.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
all part of the message. Yeah.
Mhm.
So good. Tia Levings, guys.
So glad
Yeah.
that we finally got to do this and
I know.
bring.
Thanks for being patient with all those
Of
scheduling
course.
hiccups.
Oh my goodness, of
Kind of
course.
put off being nervous about this till now. Now I'm nervous.
Yeah.
But we got to talk about your new books.
Yeah.
Listeners, we're thankful for you tuning in tonight. And before we close, I just want,
And where can they find the book?
yes,
Yes.
Oh, yeah. The books are available anywhere you buy books. So
Okay.
anywhere you want, anywhere you can pre-order I Belong to Me. And Well
Okay.
Trained Life is also in Kindle Unlimited. And I read the audio, so it's on Audible and
Yes.
all the libraries and all the things.
I listened to it on Audible, and I would say if you are an Audible person, there's something about listening to the author read their work. It is so, so impactful, and I cannot recommend this book enough.
Thank you.
It's amazing, amazing. So
great.
please,
Really
please,
great.
please, listeners, go out there and get this book. You will
Yeah.
not regret it.
All right. So find Tia Levings wherever you'll
Hmm.
find her all over the place when you start searching. So look her up. She has a daily blog that comes out and just lots of material, and it's all good. It's all fantastic. So we want to remind you as always to be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.